I'm going to show you a little movie which represents some work that I did with my colleague, Dr. John Derrick, a couple of years ago here at RMIT, where we used Second Life as a platform to construct a virtual art gallery. And you'll see in the video that the show was put on at real art galleries. In front of us here we've got Melbourne Art Rooms in Port Melbourne, also known as Mars Gallery. And the show was also put on at the Pratt Institute of Art and Engineering in New York and at a gallery called Gallery Seikiko in the Chelsea district of New York. And the Americans liked the show very much because they appreciated the way in which we were challenging the rules about what is real, I guess. Art always challenges the rules about what is real and what is not. But in this particular show, you will see that we took real artworks that had been hanging on a wall or sculpture that had been in the middle of a floor and prints, and we digitised them. We sampled them and we put them into a completely virtual context, an online context where the best way that people could experience them was as an avatar, which meant that visitors to the gallery could either log on from a remote location, such as in another country or in another space altogether, and could interface with the environment as an avatar. They digitised themselves, in other words. So it's about humans digitising themselves in order to go into a digital virtual world and experience digital virtual art. If that sounds a bit geeky, that's because it is. But I figure that this is where things are heading in the 21st century, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But for now, I'll just show you the video. We haven't got sound. Oh, right, so there are two avatars. That's actually you and me, isn't it, John?
It is, yep.
That's you and me in our avatar selves. We spent quite a long time hanging around as avatars when we were doing this project. We were fully immersed.
And you can customise your avatar however you want it to look. So
as...
it's a bit grotesque. Like my character's a bit grotesque. So I like playing around with big lips and just sort of experiment with different sort of personas.
You've got those interesting big sideburns, which are now very fashionable, yeah.
Yeah, they aren't so big now, but I'm just exaggerating with my avatar.
Hey, we just walked through a wall there. I don't know if you noticed that. And we're walking through the wall, and once we're inside, we're going to visit some prints, which are actually digital version of beautiful prints made by Melbourne artist Jane Hall. And once inside here, oh yes, there are those big lips, John. That's the Mick Jagger impersonation. Yeah, very rock and roll. Now, those sort of sparks and flecks that you see happening on the screen are called particles. And if I have any particle physicists in the room, they are imitating particles that are under investigation by physicists in the real world. They are sort of epiphenomena.
And there's the real thing. So we're looking at the real and the virtual and how they kind of intersect. And I was going to say with the prints and the cube, like in Second Life, you can actually, avatar can touch the walls and change the configuration of the prints. So the idea of the avatar interacting with the artwork.
Here we are interacting with a sculpture done by our colleague Dr. James Hullick, who's a music PhD candidate at RMIT. And there is a shot of the original sculpture which we modelled it on. It's a metal bowl and it is spinning and making quite a lot of clacking noise in the real world.
And James's background is a composer, so he's looking at sounds, like sort of, what the sounds in the environment. And as the bowl spins, and they're actually activated by robotic arms, so you can squeeze it and the user of the gallery can squeeze it and rotate the bowl.
Here is a painting, another painting which we have digitised by Julie Mielowska, another great Melbourne artist, and we've sort of created a pop-up diorama out of this painting. There's the original in real life, and you'll see that there is writing across the canvas, which were beautiful, very poetic lines of Julie's about tomorrow never comes, very wistful kinds of lines of poetry. And inside this environment, it's possible for the user to write on the canvas, to write their own poetry across the painting. Now this is John painting, as he always is, using a spray can. And as you can see in this environment, the particles of paint are hanging around in the air, because anything can happen in a virtual environment. We were messing with the physics of the world, and John decided that he wanted the paint to remain present in the air as he was spraying it.
And it's in a 3D space, like traditionally, like my background is paint, so I'm painting on a 2D canvas surface, but in the second life you can paint in 3 dimensions and interact with that paint stroke. So that's where Second Life, sort of takes painting a bit further.
We are now inside John's cave painting, and this was made by digitising some oil portraits, which look like very figurative, very naturalistic looking portraits of human faces that John sampled in a game engine and then replayed through Second Life. So this is really a process where we're taking traditional painterly images and processing and reprocessing, sampling and reproducing in a virtual environment. John was very interested in experimenting with the textures and colours. He was also interested in time. Tell us how time's working here, John.
So like with a traditional 2-dimensional sort of oil painting, it's static, it doesn't move. With Second Life, you can actually sort of make it time-based. And I was also interested in having the artist touch in the virtual environment, because I find a lot of virtual environments sort of quite sterile and cold. So I was putting my paint strokes into the virtual environment.
You were putting your paint strokes into a virtual environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To kind of humanise it. So give it the artist's touch, because a lot of virtual environments are constructed entirely inside the computer, so they don't have the brush stroke, the mark of the artist. So that's where I wanted to sort of challenge that idea of the virtual environment being sort of devoid of any marks made by the artist.
So you're interested in the idea of making a human mark
making a human
inside that digital space. Like, what can we sample? What of the human can we sample to put into the space that will leave a human trace, as it were? It's a big question.
I'm a painter, so that the marks they make on the canvas with oil paint, that's the trace. So I want to put that trace into a virtual environment.
Thanks for that, John. I'm going to show a little funny movie now. This video, by the way, is on show upstairs on level 3. 2?
Yeah.
It's so big in here and I always get lost.
Yeah.
It's like a big car park, really. Okay. Now we're going to have a look at a cute, funny little commercial video about a location in a virtual world called Blue Mars that our friend and colleague Daniel Mounsey, who is a world exponent of virtual art, virtual design, virtual performance and robotics, and who is artist in residence at Victoria University. Thanks for being here today with us, Dan. Dan, you muck around a bit in Blue Mars, don't you? We know you are the great expert. Yeah. Well, I'm just going to show a little promo. It's a couple of years old now, this promo, but it gives you an idea of some of the hype around virtual worlds, in contrast to what you've just seen.
Imagine a world, a synergy of inspiration and creativity, of collaborative entertainment, profound knowledge, and intelligent fun. A world such as this has never existed. until today. At the San Francisco Bay Studios of Virtual Space Entertainment, our award-winning team of artists, designers, and engineers are developing a high-definition virtual world of unparalleled beauty. With compelling landscapes, futuristic cities by Sid Mead and other artists, and major attractions from renowned organizations such as the National Geographic Society, the Smithsonian Institution, and the National Association of College Stores, we are creating a world of the future. Except this future is now. Set on a terraformed Mars, it is a virtual world of living museums, interactive science pavilions, personalized connections with past and present geniuses, artistic self-expression, and just plain fun. Want to pilot your own submarine and explore the ocean depths? You can. Want to live and work in an underwater city or kick back in a cliffside residence with breathtaking views? You can. Want to design your own mission to Mars, create compelling in-world entertainment, or just shop and party with new friends? You can. To maximize the impact of this deeply enriching and entertaining environment, VSE is establishing strategic partnerships with some of the most prestigious scientific, educational, and commercial institutions on the planet Earth. For the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History, we are creating a virtual version of their upcoming $40 million exhibit on the origins of mankind, as well as 3 installations on the real-world exhibition floor. For public television's premier science series, Nova, we are creating a series of animated sequences that will bring historically accurate, digitally created hominids to life in ways never before possible. For the National Geographic Society, we are recreating the tomb of the first emperor of China and its famed terracotta warriors, bringing this history alive. For Turk, the preeminent educational research group, we are assembling an elaborate virtual science center that will bring together scientific expertise from NASA, NOAA, and other federal and international agencies that have the most current images, data, and models for space exploration and planetary climatology. It will be run by our colonists and top scientists from around the world. And for business, we plan year-round trade show pavilions, sales and marketing centers, and high-definition conference rooms for secure meetings worldwide. Each of these attractions, from National Geographic and Turk to the Smithsonian Institution, will bring millions of committed users to our world. And to top it all off, the National Association of College Stores, with its 3,100 college and university members worldwide, is partnering with us to bring their online shopping population of millions of students and alumni into our 3D world, giving us connections to many of the major colleges and universities in the solar system. As you can see, unlike the other virtual worlds under development, we know where our users will come from. Each of our strategic partners will deliver their millions of committed supporters directly to our world. And the ever-growing synergy will make them want to stay to experience more compelling content, more interesting social interactions, and more good fun and entertainment. And finally, just think what these millions of committed users will mean for our in-world commerce. The average expenditure per user in current social websites is over $140 per year. To us, this promises a significant and growing bottom line for years to come. So join with us in this unparalleled opportunity as we create Blue Mars 2150 and the new future in mind.
The future in mind. Interesting. For those of you, it takes a little bit of a mental leap to understand what's happening in these virtual worlds. If I can point out to you, for example, that when we're looking at scenes, not that, I don't have an avatar like that, but I'm interested in the idea. When we're looking at scenes, interestingly, these scenes are devoid of humans or avatars. But when we see people in these scenes, avatars, these are real people who are logged on. So although it looks a bit like a cartoon, for example, it looks like you're observing a kind of a cartoon world, what you're looking at is actually a space where these users are avatars inside the space. So an avatar is a 3D graphic that represents a human user who is logged on somewhere in the world. I'm sure you've seen the movie Avatar. Perhaps you've seen the movie Avatar. Perhaps you've seen the movie The Matrix, in which we understand humans transferring into the inner workings of a computer universe, as it were. This is happening now inside virtual worlds. And although the technology at the moment is very clunky, extremely clunky, it feels to us a bit like we used to joke, it feels like we're in the days perhaps of the first Model T Ford. We haven't even arrived at the Model T Ford yet. Or if in terms of cinema, we're not even at the Méliès brothers.
And I think too, like with the Renaissance painting, like early Renaissance painting, where they're quite some of the imagery is quite childlike, or sort of static and block-like.
Yeah.
Like I see Second Life is very much like that too.
Okay, so we're using analogies in the history of art and the history of representation to suggest that this is a technology which at the moment is very much in its infancy. There is no doubt that the trajectory, the movement forward within the culture is towards a moment that some people describe as singularity. In other words, there will be a time in the not too distant future where the interface, as it were, becomes more seamless, so that we'll be dealing with the technology in a much more organic way, instead of having to go in to the technology through the portal of this screen. These screens will disappear quite soon, and we will have the files in the space with us, for example. Yeah.
That's right. Another analogy is like in the holodeck in Star Trek, where you're surrounded by the imagery. So I think with the virtual world, it's still a 2D interfacing with a 2D computer screen. With eventually, like Lisa was saying, it's going to be we're going to be immersed in these images are going to be in 3 dimensions in real space. So we're just at the beginnings of that phase.
We are at the beginning of that phase, and we see it around us still every day. Just around us, this idea that here are the humans immersed. This is a batch of humans who are undergoing basic training for full immersion. These humans are immersed right now. Okay, they're at the tram stop, but they are plugged in. And this is what it's about. This is pre-flight training for the world that is to come. And the definition of immersion is actually one in which the real world, the focus on the screen, the focus on the files is such that the real world disappears, simply fades away into the background, leaving the human with the illusion that they are present and living in that virtual world. So it's that kind of borderline that I'm interested in discussing with you today. And before I do, I want to flip back to the name of this entire exhibition just to give us some grounding. And it's all about convergence. So what are we talking about when we're talking about convergence? Well, first of all, we're talking about the convergence of technologies, which in the past were discrete and individual. The telephone used to be a black plastic thing that sat on the hall table. There used to be a typewriter in the same room on the desk, next to the phone, but separate from it. You might receive a telegram in the afternoon. But these days, technologies are all coming together: wireless, television, film. I have arguments with people in my school here at RMIT suggesting that there is no longer any film. What is film? It's now everything is going through the web. It's all digital. It has converged. The signals have converged. There are no discrete elements anymore. The phone, video, film, all flow through the same channel. Digital signal is like water, it flows. And that means for creators and designers, if you can take part in that flow, if you understand how that flow is operating and if you can create content for the flow, you're doing well. This means also that because there are uses of technology in common across arts and sciences, we've got a lot of common territory now, so that artists and scientists are working together. And we see that a lot here at RMIT. The structures that were developed for entertainment and game sectors are also influential on the structure of, I better stick to my script, new applications for the military, forensics, law, education and science. The common factor here is that virtual technology allows for display imagery and role play of unprecedented realism. So anytime you can get humans together using technology that gives the impression of realism inside a role play scenario, you might be training somebody to be a salesperson, for example, or training somebody to play golf. If they can do it in a virtual technology scenario that...
what comes to mind too when you talk about that is military. Like the soldiers over in Afghanistan and Iraq, all being, those sort of shoot 'em up games where they're sort of really realistic. They're trained on warfare using 3D gaming.
Well, most of this technology comes out of military research and development. The military, the American military particularly, are leaders, world leaders in the development of this technology. So these kinds of simulations came out of training simulations, exactly as you point out, for the development of soldierly skills. So that in these online environments, people can use their avatars to socialise, to explore various regions of the virtual world, to create virtual goods, to design aspects of their virtual environment. They can also use their virtual selves, their avatars, to provide a range of services for other avatars. So as a result of this flexibility, virtual platforms like Second Life are becoming increasingly useful across business, arts and science, so that 3D graphic simulations are now used as visualisation, communication and training tools in education, in medicine, in product development, aerospace, engineering, architecture. In the law, in courtrooms, this kind of technology is used in the new field of virtual forensics, where they recreate crime scenes and use the computer simulations to figure out how fast the bullet was travelling and stuff like that. All of this is emerging as a new focus. Also in the world of medicine, we have projects here at RMIT where we've got a prize winner, Jonathan Duckworth, one of our PhDs, whose work is on display here in this exhibition, called Elements, has built a virtual system for the rehabilitation of people who have brain trauma injury. So it's not just fun and games. We're exploring these techniques knowing that the results will be feeding into a variety of applications across engineering, science and medicine. Okay, so we're also looking at the convergence of global and local, because Second Life, for example, is based on a metaphor of the globe itself, and it mimics the geographical scale and diversity of the planet. It actually seems to reflect all of the diversity that we find on the planet. Not only that, but users can log on to these environments from all over Europe, Scandinavia, North America, Australia and parts of Asia. I'm not going to include Africa because it's only possible in nations where hardware and broadband penetration are not an issue. So this is not going to be big in Pakistan. What you do have happening in countries like Africa and Pakistan is the use of mobile technology, however. The other thing about these virtual worlds is that we call them persistent. In other words, they are not switched off. In the olden days, with heritage media such as movies and television, you could switch off the technology. These environments, however, continue to exist. They operate as a parallel universe, if you like. They just run 24/7. So this means that they provide a kind of an endless river of stimulation where the avatar can travel across a virtual world that reflects and distorts the real world with quite amazing fascinations, so that you could visit the Tower of London, the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I worked on a build of the Sydney Harbour Bridge actually in a virtual world that was promoted by Telstra and Big Pond, and we recreated a world of Australia with Uluru. We had a virtual Uluru where you could go and learn about boomerangs and other Indigenous items. You can also go into Second Life and visit Gothic castles, seaside gardens. Your avatar, you can enable the avatar with special software that will allow it to engage in a variety of activities: scuba diving, sailing, dancing, eating, drinking, you know, the list goes on, so that you can engage in all kinds of simulations of human behaviour and culture in a digital context. So it's interesting then also to observe the convergence of the human and the avatar in that this occurs on both a physical level and a psychological level. I don't know about you, John, but when we were engaged in this kind of research, and when you're kind of under for weeks, days, weeks and months at a time, you know, there was a period of about a year for me when I was working on this project, and a few years earlier when I was doing the Telstra project, where I was so closely relating to my avatar that I was getting relationships mixed up. It's uncanny, often uncanny, the way you will look at your avatar doing something on the screen and feel that you are swimming. You will feel that you are dancing. You will believe that you are engaged. And that is a function of our brain chemistry, which we know now. We understand that our brains are hardwired to actually respond to visual stimuli, and the wires can get switched, so that when we're watching an illusion of movement or activity, the body and the muscles and our physiology actually believes us to be there. This is the recipe that will carry these virtual worlds forward. It's specific to our brain chemistry, that the human imagination allows us to enjoy our delusions and fantasies so much that we actually believe we're there. And
I'd say there's problems inherent in that too.
Yeah.
Like people being completely immersed in the environment where they shut out the real world. So that's a dilemma that I have working with a 2D oil painting and 3D immersive environments, where I've got this sort of like, I don't want to spend too much time in the 3D virtual environment because I'm losing my touch with the real world. So they're real issues for me as an artist.
Yes, they're big issues for children, as we know, who are engaging in game environments. And these are going to also bring forth new ethical questions around the treatment of robots, how we interrelate with robots. Avatars are a form of robot, after all. Inside these virtual worlds, we also work with artificial intelligence programs and bots, short for robots. And I've scripted for bots, and they raise all kinds of questions about how do we treat the robots? Do the robots know they're robots, or do they think they're human? These kinds of questions will be relevant later in the 21st century and have been foreseen by all of the great science fiction writers, such as Isaac Asimov, author of I, Robot, the famous 3 laws of the robot. You can look at many science fiction movies over the last 10 or 15 years, and these kinds of themes, you know, do androids dream of electric sheep? You know, how do we define consciousness in this context? What is human consciousness? If we program a robot or an avatar with consciousness, what are we doing there? How do we define that consciousness? So these are big philosophical questions.
Are we responsible for them?
Yeah, are we responsible for them? How do we treat them? Okay, this is just a little list of things that we're now into a discussion of post-humanism, also called transhumanism. Post-humanism is, look, I hope it's an ironic phrase. Does it point to a time when the humans are no longer there? I don't know. It points to a time when the humans have messed too much with the technology, I think. And I work with some of those folks. I work with an artist called Stellark, for example, who implants himself with technology and who builds robots around himself and who is on the very far edges of a certain kind of research. We love Stellark, don't we? Dan, you've worked with Stellark a lot. He's one of the canaries down the mine shaft, isn't he, really? He's helping us understand the problems that are posed to our physiology, but he also raises many of these very big philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness in this kind of environment. You probably can't read that stuff, so we'll just skip it. It's about the difference between the 20th and the 21st century, and how in the 20th century we were interested in media and information, and in the 21st century we're interested in action and experience. We are actually no longer, we're in a transition mode at the moment, I think, but very soon, when the screen disappears, the human, I think, will be much more activated around technology, and we're much more likely to see the files in the space with us. So that instead of sitting here like this, which I've been doing for too many decades now, we'll be able to call the files in and we'll be able to call other people in a holographic form. So we can have conferences, and some of you folks sitting in the audience will actually be teleporting in from Hong Kong, London and Rome. And telepresence. I'm sure have you seen the show of the rapper Tupac appearing as a holograph recently in the United States? That's an example of telepresence, where we're actually teleporting in a human form. So John could be standing here. This technology is happening now. John will be standing here looking, he'll have a blue aura around him, but this will be his hologram, and he will be in Hong Kong while we are making this presentation. That technology is with us now. It's called telepresence technology. Okay, so for designers, I wanted to swing a couple of questions because I know there's a few designers in the room. These are the questions for you folks. How do we understand the forms and the structures that we're dealing with here? Also, how do we understand the shifts in psychology that all of this implies? What notions of the real and the virtual are represented by this kind of technology? They're just big questions. We don't have to answer them right now. But if you did, you'd look at the work of these guys, Milgram and Cascino, who are a couple of electronics engineers and who were really heavily investigating these kinds of questions in the 1990s, and they came up with a taxonomy that's very useful for designers. And they say that it's very important that we understand how the display functions work within these worlds. That it's very important that we be orderly in the way we approach the design of the display and playback functions. Also, the fidelity of the images within a display. How realistically are we able to display certain works? Are we going to use video or computer graphics? What's the difference between them? We have all observed in the last 5 years the enormous steps forward in the use of computer-generated imagery in movies, for example, where there is very lifelike reproduction of images using computer graphics. That's the environment that we're talking about stepping into. An environment where it becomes increasingly difficult to tell the difference between machine-generated imagery and the real. This is just a little techie diagram that talks about some of the network stuff. I'll skip it because I think it's probably too nerdy. It's interesting just to note that when we're talking about 3D graphics, it's actually a misnomer, because what you're looking at on a computer screen is only ever 2D. It's only ever flat. Okay, it's good to remember that. It's fake 3D. actually. When you're looking at a computer screen, the orthographics, the optics, the stereoscopics, the parallax view allows you to imagine. This is the beauty of the brain. We'll imagine and sort of recreate a 3D effect, but it's actually all happening on a flat 2D surface. We're looking forward to a time when the images are actually working in a 3D context like this, in a layered kind of illusory world, which is pretty much like an insubstantial version of the real world. And this again is just Milgram and Cascino. For those of you who've got a bit of a tech interest in this, we can talk perhaps later about some of the design issues and how it's becoming increasingly documented, this kind of work. It's not rocket science, and it's interesting to get involved with. Some of the key terms here are stereoscopics, surface imaging, tracing, transparency, the use of wireframes. These are all very basic to anybody who's had any experience with animation or working in 3D studios such as Maya or Studio Max. It's all pretty basic stuff. We're just adding another layer of complexity by the time you add avatars and create whole worlds. Some other references here would, John mentioned the Renaissance, which is really where it all began, John, isn't it? What do we need to know about Cartesian coordinates?
So with the Renaissance perspective, it's all like it's a grid, and it's all gridded up. And with the Renaissance perspective, it creates the illusion of 3 dimensions. So objects get smaller as they recede. So you've got the vanishing point, and you've got receding lines going to that vanishing point, and that creates the illusion of 3-dimensional space. So with 3D computer graphics, they're actually using a Cartesian coordinate system, which is actually another sort of, there's an X, Y, and Z coordinates.
We're actually sitting in a Cartesian box right now. If you look at it, see there's a what's this? Where's the X, Y? What is it? What is it? Y, X, Z? Y, X, Z. So my hand right now, we'll see the dots. Where they meet represents lines on a grid. So we could graph my hand where it is right now. We could actually graph all of us quite beautifully in this room and reproduce ourselves digitally at the drop of a hat, because we're sitting in a grid. Do you see that? Where the dots meet creates the Cartesian grid that we're talking about. So it's just a matter of mapping elements inside that structure.
And then there's a line next to those points in space.
And Erwin Panofsky talked a lot about this in the 1950s in his brilliant and beautiful book, The Birth and Rebirth of Pictorial Space. And I know that we have some Renaissance specialists in the room who are probably yawning at this point. Okay, the term transformation, I'm just going to skip over that, but these are the operations that we're doing when we're designing inside these graphic environments. We are translating, scaling, rotating objects. We're looking at the coordinates of the vertices. Here's a vertex, there's a vertex. We're just mapping them and putting them in space. We're projecting, we're clipping, we're texturizing, and so on.
And and over time too, so you can actually rotate these objects inside the computer, and it's time-based, where 2D native perspective is static, it doesn't move.
Right.
So that's where the 3D graphics actually can start moving things, but it's still an illusion.
And lighting them too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can place lights within the scene and illuminate the objects.
Yeah, it's a bit like playing God inside a virtual world. Okay, so here is real art in a real gallery. Well, I'll flip back to the discussion now that we've got a bit of background. I'm just going to flip back to a discussion of the dark luminance showing, which was about a big gallery. This is the Mars Gallery, but it looks a lot like the gallery that we worked with in both galleries in New York. It's a generic gallery space. There are some paintings on the wall, and there is also here, this is a large-scale projection this image here, you'll see the avatars that were on screen before. That's John and myself, or our avatars rather. You see I refer to them as us, even though it's not really us. They feel like us. They are our avatars. We are very close to them. This is what happens in these environments. So there we are, flying around, and there are probably a couple of computers down here and a couple of projection boxes. And there are paintings and sculptures placed around the environment so that visitors to the gallery could come in, they could look at the real art, and then they can log on as avatars and enjoy the artwork that was happening in a virtual space. This was the prototype virtual gallery designed by Daniel Mounsey, which we worked with at first, and which we thought, yeah, let's put the whole thing up in space, because we were so entranced with the spaciousness of the virtual world. But we found that the avatars couldn't find their way to it. A bit like trying to find your way here today, into this room. It was quite challenging. Only in this case, it was quite the opposite. To get in here, you had to negotiate a number of boxes. You had to navigate a bunch of Cartesian spaces and corridors in order to arrive at this space. The challenge with this particular virtual space was that there was no Cartesian grid. We set the avatar free in space, which was just too much space for the avatar to deal with. And they kept getting lost. So that's an interesting study in extremes.
Yeah. And with 3D sort of programs too, when you're building these objects in 3D programs, you actually get a grid as a reference. So without that, it is very sort of disorientating.
Yes, so these, for example, are sculptures and paintings sort of hanging in midair. And the reference points around them were these very interesting and beautiful, we think, abstract spaces. They had chains hanging from them.
And the idea is with the avatar to actually fly and look at the works of art up close. You can get it right up close.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. We forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
Your avatar's flying most of the time in Second Life. You do a bit of walking, a bit of running, and a lot of flying, depending on how much ground you have to travel. And you can also teleport inside a virtual world. So that if I want to go and visit Amsterdam inside the virtual world, I can just teleport over to Amsterdam for the afternoon quite easily, just at the press of a button. My avatar doesn't have to fly all the way to Amsterdam. I can just take myself there in a moment. Here is a wireframe of the gallery that we ended up with. We decided that the aerial gallery was a little bit too abstract, and so John got to work with the wireframe and created a geodesic dome, which Buckminster Fuller would have loved to see his geodesic dome in a virtual world. And John brought the gallery down to earth in Second Life, so to speak. Underneath the dome, we thought that it would give the gallery a stronger sense of identity. Then, for a bit of a joke, we even put a Mars facade into the virtual space. But if you walk through that door there, through the Mars gallery front door, it's like a stage set, isn't it, John?
Yeah.
Which was a bit ironic on your part, I think, doing that, considering that the whole thing is a fake, to create a fake gallery in a fake gallery.
You can actually walk through the doors, but you come out the other side.
It's not what you expect. It's possible to create all kinds of tricks. A lot of the joy, a lot of the fun of virtual worlds is the ironic jokes that you can play on the difference between the real and the virtual. There's that painting of Julie's in the background there, just to give you an idea of the scale. It's way bigger than the avatars, and there's a little board there where you can write poetry and things like that. So we wanted to empower the avatar, as John said before, to be able to leave marks in this world. There's the sculpture of the spinning orbs, and there's the cave painting on the left.
And with the spinning balls, you usually touch them and turn them on, so they rotate, and they listen to sound when you do that.
You can ride them, can't you?
Yeah, yeah.
You can jump on them and take a ride, which is something that you can't do in most art galleries with the sculpture. Okay, this is the set of prints by Jane Hall, which you remember before from the video, and if the avatar touches that wall, the whole configuration of the wall will change and the colours will change. So again, it's very interactive. The idea was about empowering the avatar to interact with the artwork, to make the artwork move, to make it change.
And I would add too, and the idea of 2D art is becoming immersive. So the avatar is actually immersed in the artwork in 360 degrees. So the idea is that's sort of suggesting where artwork is going.
Right. So back to this idea that in future we will be surrounded by the files. I refer to them as the files. The files are the digital information that constitutes the illusion. How do we transport the files? How do we treat the files? How do we construct the files? In future, we will be surrounded by the files. So at the moment, we're all very entranced by our screens. We're all very focused on the screens. And this is the Baroque moment of the screen. There appears to be screens everywhere, and that's a sure sign that the screen is about to disappear. It's a bit like the horse and buggy.
Yep.
The horses and buggies were crowding the streets before the T-model Ford. That's another view of the prints.
And with the camera viewpoint, so you actually move the camera viewpoint to any angle. You can go through objects, you can actually go through the land into water. So you can actually change your viewpoint from any angle. Where with say a 2D work of art on the wall, you can't just see the centre of what the artist has sort of done.
Has given you.
Yeah,
and it's static. Yeah. And it never changes. Yeah. This work is ever changing, depending on the avatar viewpoint. So it's a complete cognitive shift, really, in the description of visual art. This is another look at John's work up close, John Derrick's paintings there in the background, and you remember how they were all in motion and how those layers and textures were moving across each other over time.
And I was sort of, in the real gallery space, I actually had a real painting, projecting textures back over the real painting. So there I was playing with the real and virtual and trying to mesh the two different sort of art forms, the two different pictorial space, so 2D Renaissance space and meshing that with 3D Cartesian space. And does it come up with something new? So I'm asking questions of what's more important? Is the artist touch or the virtual? Can I import that into a virtual world? So I was asking all those questions with this, but within Second Life, it was all virtual. But with the real paintings, with the projection over the top of that, there was real and virtual.
You call this cave painting?
Yeah, I suppose the idea, cave stands for cave audio visual environment, and it's a references early cave painting as well, like the marks made on caves. And being immersed in a cave, so you're surrounded by it.
Immersed in a cave and surrounded by it, yeah. Because I'm not sure if any of you saw the great documentary by Werner Herzog a couple of years ago. Cave of Dreaming, in which he pointed out that the cave is, of course, the prototypical location for artistic, sacred, ritual activity. So this is a virtual cave, isn't it? We're really just retreating to a kind of virtual cave. Plato's cave, thank you very much. Of course, we need that reference too. There are the paintings on the wall in the centre of the miasma of the digital illusion.
So the paintings in the centre are the real paintings, and I paint in life too. So one of I think is important is artists engaging in real life. I have people sitting for me in my studio and painting from life, and then digitise the portraits and project that back over top of them.
So, like many large exhibition spaces on Second Life, this virtual gallery is designed in a theme park style, you could say, to encourage a sense of play and experimentation. The avatar finds herself under a transparent dome in an open space that resembles a small sports field. And it's important to notice here that the avatar functions as a kind of a camera, really, a moving camera whose viewpoint is free to roam within the space. So when I'm actually physically within this space, if I want to get a close-up, I have to go up and look at the painting on the wall. However, my avatar can just project herself, can project her vision anywhere in the space. My eyes can fly. My avatar self doesn't have to fly with my eyes. I can take my vision through the space. That's also another very important development in this whole discussion of how to design for navigation within a 3D space.
And you can see actually here, that's what the real human does. Is they activate these camera controls and you can change position.
Yeah.
I was going to say too, you can actually, the avatar, you can remove the avatar and there's a viewpoint from the avatar, but there's actually a viewpoint from the human too. You can change, you can work with both.
Yes, indeed. So it's a very flexible environment for visual effects, and you're looking at orthoscopic, multiscopic and panoramic imagery inside this environment. Okay, I'm going to close for questions in a sec. That's interesting. That's the graffiti wall by Renee Van Can, where it's possible for the avatar to actually spray around a bit of graffiti of their own.
And the idea there too is actually handmade graffiti that can be imported into a virtual world.
Yeah.
And then interact it so that you can touch the wall and it reveals graffiti. And then the avatar has its blank hand to can actually paint 3D space.
Okay, so that I've skipped over quite a bit of the tech stuff, but you can see that what we were sort of interested in exploring in the research aspect of this. There's a whole layer of research that comes out of this project, and it was about the taxonomy of virtual displays. And this useful tool helped us distinguish between a mixed reality environment and a completely virtual environment. It's clear that we've got to define this kind of technology is more than just a display tool. It's a space where the real and the virtual merge, where time, animation and the avatar's enhanced perspective allow or challenge our understanding of pictorial space. And all of this takes us beyond our real human capacity, as it were, because when I act through my avatar, I can extend my sense of presence in the virtual world by making my own marks in that world. And it's not, certainly in a gallery space, it's not possible to make those marks. And we see that, in fact, I was talking to some of the animation students who are here today. You were developing objects that can disintegrate in virtual worlds. You're actually you're programming virtual objects which will disintegrate when I hit them, yeah? Right. So this is a whole new kind of layer of complexity where we are again imitating physics of the real world and employing a new kind of virtual physics. So I think we'd like to thank you very much for being here today. Thank you.